Good morning, YouTube. Tire Metalhead Weatherman here. I hope you guys are doing well. Hopefully, you had a good Saturday afternoon. Meant to put a video up, but I was dealing with a lot of issues with my computer. It was mainly my screen capture software, which is basically the center point around how I do all of this. It just kept on cutting out after a certain point. So a video that was meant to be much longer ended up being about 2 minutes. So dealing with that for 4 hours. Before I knew it, it was already midnight, and I don't think anyone wanted to watch a video that late. So I figured I'd just pop up a new video in the morning and just go from there. That being said, marginal risk of severe storms today. Nothing to really worry about here. It's going to be a pretty quiet day for Super Bowl Sunday. Highs around Arizona are going to be in the 70s. Lows are going to be more so in the 40s and 50s at the stadium. So should be a pretty uneventful day as far as the weather is concerned. Let's hope the fireworks remain on the field. That being said, there's a slight changeover of rain to snow across the Appalachians, but across the southeast, we're looking like we're going to mostly be staying rain. Might be a little hope that there's a changeover on the tail end of to see some snow flurries, but beyond that, I'm not really expecting much. The tricky thing about this, of course, is with the Gulf of Mexico moisture being set as it is, a lot of warm air is going to usually advect with it, and I think that's what was the case here. So the potential was there, but overall, the results don't look like they're going to be showing. We'll see what happens over the next couple of hours, though. So, yeah, I'm just not saying that it's over yet entirely. If anyone is looking for snow, I wouldn't mind seeing a little bit, but I don't expect much out of it over here in Atlanta. But anyway, let's go ahead and look at the main topic of this video, and that is the very dangerous setup that I've been seeing. When I tried to make the video last night and going through all of it, I can tell that this is a very volatile type setup. This is the type of setup that you see towards early to mid-spring, especially across the southeast, and lo and behold, that's where we are looking. We have the Ozarks in play. Oklahoma is now in play as well. This is extended a little bit further to the north than it did on yesterday. So now we're seeing parts of southwest Oklahoma in play. It's extended a little bit further east. Jackson's a little bit further in that slight risk now. You see most of western Tennessee starting to get into it, actually. And maybe even trying to sneak its way into that little boot heel of Missouri, and maybe even a tiny little piece of southwestern Kentucky. Did I say southwestern Oklahoma? I meant southeastern. Just thought I'd correct that now in case I did mess up. But that being said, we all know the cities through here. Dallas, Fort Worth, Plano, Arlington in there as well. We have Shreveport, Alexandria, and numerous other areas across northern Louisiana, Greenville, Mississippi. I'm not super familiar with all the cities through there. Jackson and Memphis, I already mentioned you guys. And through most of Arkansas, too, we have Little Rock, Pine Bluff, and multiple other areas. Well, I think that's Pine Bluff, Missouri. I keep getting things mixed up. Listen, I'm not a morning person, okay? That being said, that's our day 4 threat. We go to day 5, and this area went crazy overnight. Look at this. Last night, we were seeing it maybe getting up towards Cincinnati. Now we have almost half the state of Ohio involved in this, extending all the way towards the Great Lakes. Towards I'm guessing this is Ontario. I'm trying to make sure I got it right. I think this is Ontario, because I know this one's Erie. But through the Ohio and Tennessee valleys, now we can expect severe weather, too. We have a slight risk of day 5, which is crazy. And then across the southeast, we have our areas that remain generally the same. We're just in the north of New Orleans and Baton Rouge. So, but we'll still keep an eye on you guys. I would anticipate maybe a marginal risk will be issued. Areas to the east, I could see a similar situation. Maybe over towards western Virginia, West Virginia too. Maybe even parts of Pennsylvania too. There could be some persisting dynamics to give you a slight chance of a severe storm, even extending as far south as the Panhandle of Florida. But it's too many cities to name here. Just to name a few, across Ohio, we have Columbus, Cleveland, Cincinnati. Pretty much all the big cities in Kentucky, Louisville, Bowling Green, and numerous other areas. Almost all of Tennessee is in this. and of course the entire state of Alabama, just about the entire state of Mississippi as well. And then Atlanta, you're in play for this too. Chattanooga, you are as well. Columbus, you are. And then towards the Western Panhandle, Florida, we'll be watching you too. Let's go into the models here, and we'll figure out how this setup is coming to be. Starting out with the Euro, of course, looking at my favorite map, Vorticity. This is the soon-to-be outdated OOZ Euro. The 06Z should be coming in, but it won't be in range anyway, so we'll just have to work with this. But here's our current system that is bringing that snow probability. Mostly going to be warm air advecting on the exterior of it. The interior is going to be the coldest part, so if you happen to be under it, you might have a shot at some snow. But that being said, it's heading into Monday afternoon. This is a new trough that develops, but this one doesn't really look like it's going to be bringing severe weather. It's just going to bring some cold air in along with it. But this will also force this ridge to push up a little bit, and this warm sector will develop right across here. If I can get my marker to pop up. There we go. But right across here, you start to see that warm sector develop. See where you get these 573s and up, and higher numbers right here based on these lines. That's indicative of a warm sector, because the warmer the air is, the higher this value will be. So we'll move this forward here. Oops, didn't mean to jump that up. I meant to move forward. But we can see that as this trough ejects out, as this new trough comes in, that warm sector gets a lot more abundant. And as a result, when this next little section of cold air clashes with this warm air, we know what the result's going to be. And the probability is going to be that we will end up seeing severe weather henceforth in those slight risk regions. And from what I'm seeing here, there's a potential for multiple modes here. I see potential for a few damaging windstorms across this region where the forcing is really strong. But there could be some discrete cells mixed in, or embedded supercells. So the threat for both tornadoes and wind is very much real at this point. And then this also persists into Thursday. I see potential for a line of storms and also line segments where we could see embedded supercells. Might have to watch towards the south side of this. And one other thing that I find alarming is, look what I see here. I talk about this a lot on the channels, and you might want to pay attention to this if you're new to it. One thing to note is these little ISO bars here. When they're tight like this, usually you have more storm coverage, but usually there's so many storms they don't have the ability to organize as quickly, and the severe weather threat will start to lessen, especially with the tornado threat in most cases. But when you see something like this, where you see these ISO bars kind of stretched out a bit like this is always something you have to look out for, because this usually will allow for a few discrete cells to pop up ahead of the main line. And this increases the tornado threat, because these storms don't have to compete with each other for the warm, moist air that's needed to fuel them. So I'm going to be keeping a special eye towards the southeast on Thursday, but not to say that we can't get some crazy weather up here towards the Tennessee and Ohio valleys as well. Maybe even parts of the mid-Atlantic throughout the day. So we'll have to just play this by ear and watch really closely. We'll be continually doing update videos on this forecast leading up to the event, and I'm considering giving a live stream a shot here, depending on how things go. If I'm off work, then because rain is expected on Thursday, I will definitely be live streaming this. So that's what the Euro looks like. The GFS paints a slightly more gnarly picture, actually, if I were to say so myself. I'm going to jump this forward again, if this will go. There we go. So we see the trough ejection happening here on Tuesday. Wednesday, here's our storm system. Forcing's more subtle, but the question becomes then, is the forcing so subtle that a cap that develops out ahead of this, can it be broken? That becomes a question mark in this situation, because we see here that we have those ISO bars stretched out a little bit further than on the Euro. But the question then becomes, if there's warm air aloft, if the cap develops, and from what I saw on the sounding, it's very much possible that ends up being the case. So far, the cap here doesn't look like it's strong enough to hold, and it ends up breaking. We do see a marginal tornado threat with this, but I think this will be upgraded in the coming days. But this also looks like an embedded supercell, has the classic supercell look. Lapse rates at the mid levels are pretty sufficient, but there is a very strong helicity up towards the low to mid levels of the atmosphere. So we'll have to keep an eye on this area throughout Wednesday. So move this forward, we'll see increased coverage. And then one thing that also concerns me is this little feature right here. I've never gone over this, but when you see a little section like this pop up and heading from the north, especially from the Gulf, with a setup like this is what you call a confluence band, from the looks of it right here, at least. I might be wrong. Feel free to correct me if I am. But this confluence band is usually a big-time fire starter. This usually ends up causing a outflow boundary to set up, and usually this will allow for a hotbed of severe storms to form. And given the fact that there's such low-level forcing and the cap already being broken across this region, this could be a gnarly setup. This could be the setup or the beginning of a potential tornado outbreak. Note that I said potential. This is not guaranteed. We're still 4 or 5 days out on any of this, so more or less this is partially hearsay. There's been plenty of days where we get tornado outbreaks, and there's plenty of days where there's practically a bust, so all we can do is wait and see, unfortunately. But we're going to definitely be keeping a close eye on this sector as we head into Thursday. So the cap already will be broken across this region most likely, and discrete cells look like they already will start to occur right around noon, I would say, even across Mississippi. Right now this looks like it has a marginal severe threat, but look at that helicity. There's a lot of spin in the atmosphere, especially towards the low levels, and I find that very alarming. So regardless of whether we get discrete or embedded supercells, tornadoes do look like a very probable hazard. We look at other parameters, that's very much possible too. And this looks a lot more widespread too, because if you compared that to the Euro that we saw a second ago, even towards the Ohio Valley, it looks like madness, pretty much, really. I think it's going to be more of a linear deal, but we can't rule out the threat of tornadoes up there. I think the tornado threat is going to mainly be based to the south. So that being said, by the time we get into Thursday evening, I think a lot of the parameters will start to dissipate a bit here. There may be a small sector, again, like I mentioned, over towards maybe Virginia, West Virginia, and North Carolina, maybe parts of South Carolina too. A small portion right here. I'm going to try to do a little drawing here. Oh, that was horrible. Try to start it again. Not much room on this computer desk. But right across here, there may be a secondary or a third area that develops overnight for a brief period where we could see a severe storm or two. Like I said, by this point, I think a lot of the dynamics will start to be going away at this point. So it's going to be hard to really hone in on that. We'll have to wait till about maybe 2 days out to see what that ends up doing. Really the night of, truthfully. But as we head towards Friday afternoon, that front's going to be passing through and our severe weather threat will be over, leading to a much cooler but calmer weekend. So that being said, I'm going to get into some of the parameters here now. We're going to mainly start with the low-level jet here. Oops, I did not mean to click that. I don't know how that even came up. So here we are looking at the low-level jet. We're going to do our comparisons with the Euro and the GFS because these two both look very much different. And then on top of that, this is the OOZ Euro and this is the 06Z GFS. So these models are on different time frames. We need the 12Z Euro for an update, and then we already have the up-to-date GFS. So given how far out we are, I'm just working with what I got, honestly. That being said, we're going to jump this all the way up towards Wednesday afternoon. We can see a little maximum that tries to develop here, but this is going to be developing ahead of time with the storm system. But we also see that wind maximum starting to develop over Oklahoma, hence why I think this area got extended a little further north. So we'll have to watch this region as well now, along with the area, this bulk shear component that I'm seeing here. But across this part of northern Texas, I'm a little bit leery of that. I think that we might be a little too close to the front to take advantage of this. But I think the possibility for some severe storms exists even as we head into the evening hours here. As we roll this forward, as we head into tomorrow, and even with the euro, we're starting to see increased low-level jet energy across the Ohio Valley, and then eventually we see this start to head into the southeast ahead of time. By this point, the main line's starting to come in, and we're getting a low-level jet around 45 to 50 knots. And low-level jet, interestingly enough, is actually higher the closer we get towards that system. So, like I said, we could still see all three hazards possible across the Ohio Valley and even into parts of the mid-Atlantic. Once the front passes, though, the winds are going to increase, but the storm threat will be over, and we'll just have a colder, blustery Friday, and then after that we should be good. That being said, let's switch things over to the GFS, and this paints a different picture, of course, like I mentioned earlier. A little bit stronger of a wind maximum pops up here earlier in the day. This would be about maybe 3 or 4 p.m. Central Time, I would say. Low-level jet towards 50 knots in a similar area. But look what happens as we get closer towards the overnight hours. This pocket here becomes really active. I'm interested to see what this sounding kind of looks like. Marginal tornado threat, but geez, that helicity right there is unbelievable. Look at that, 428 meters squared per second squared, and this is still a linear storm from the looks of it, or an embedded supercell. So this is dangerous right here. This has like a 50% or a 50% sounding probability of a tornado. We'll see if that actually ends up coming to fruition or not, but the fact that we're seeing a helicity that strong is very alarming. Just shows how strong that low-level jet is getting. And as we move this forward here, this is heading into the afternoon hours. Look how much further spanning this this little maximum is right here. And there's a big maximum that pops up here just to the south of the Ohio-Kentucky border here. That's going to be very interesting to see how that plays out. Because I do anticipate the chance of storms developing across this region earlier in the day too. And as time goes on, that low-level jet is strong all across the severe weather region. And I think that's why that slight risk was extended so far to the north. Because we're seeing a 50-knot jet all the way up towards the Great Lakes, towards Lake Erie, and Lake Ontario. Same can be said across southeast. We have some very impressive wind maximums according to the GFS. So very alarming stuff to see here. So tornado outbreak could be possible. Severe weather outbreak is looking relatively likely at this point. And this is just looking at the low-level jet. We still have to look at the warm sector and the dew points, of course, to really start to hone in on things a little further. And really, things can still uptick from here. I'm not so worried about the Cape right now, because I know some of my viewers have been around here a minute, and they know how I like to do things. But given how far out we are, these global models aren't good with Cape. Usually, the short-range models are much better. So that being said, let's go ahead and switch over to that. So here we are looking at the surface temperatures. And I'm going all the way back from today just so we can get a good look at things. But you can already see by Monday afternoon that warm sector is already really starting to lock itself in here. Just really all across this region, even for the areas I'm about to mark here, not all of them are expected to see severe weather, but we're already getting into the 60s for a lot of places. All across this region right here. And then as time goes on, I'm going to leave this line as we go. And what we're going to notice here, that warm sector advects a little bit further to the north by the time we get towards Tuesday afternoon. We're getting into the mid-60s across the south, and now we're getting into the 60s across areas like West Virginia now, like right here, for example. Excuse me. And then when we get to Wednesday, look at this. Look at this area that pops up. That warm sector now has made its way all the way into the Ohio Valley. This is what you call a negative PNA setup. The oscillation is going to have cool air to the west, warm air to the east, and wherever these two end up meeting up, that's typically going to be the flashpoint. And this is just by noon, we're already dealing with temperatures towards the 70s here. So look at this area. So this is a very broad warm sector here that's developed. all across the region. We see a little bit of cold air damming there too, but that's not really relevant to what we're dealing with here. But right across this entire region that I've enclosed here, we're dealing with 60-degree temperatures, which is nuts to think about. So we'll move that forward, and right towards the end of this, you can already see some 80-degree temperatures that pop up here. By the time we get to the evening hours, this goes away, but look what happens when we head back into Wednesday. Look what's happened. Boom. Fronts pass through this region here, and now a new sector has developed here. Here's our front. This is when our severe threat will be completely over. But just out ahead of it, look at what we see here. We see multiple areas where we're above 65 degrees Fahrenheit by noon. This is where I'm thinking the greatest probability of a tornado threat would be. But there's a pocket across here where we're seeing mid to upper 60s here too. So it's these two areas right here that I'm watching extremely close. So that being said, it's going to be a lot to cover. It's going to be an interesting live stream. Hopefully this doesn't end up being too bad of an outbreak, if at all. But proof is definitely there in the pudding, so to speak. And then when we look at the GFS, it's a pretty similar situation, unfortunately. So there's a lot of agreement on that. So that's a very telling sign of things to come. Look at that. Look at what happens there Wednesday. Same deal, stretches just as far to the north. In fact, it's a little bit warm over here towards central Texas too, which I find that alarming. Seeing some 80s in there. And then when we head into Thursday, it's a very broad warm sector there too. Pockets a little bit further to the east though with that one. But the result looks like it's going to end up being all the same. Some pretty frigid air comes into the northeast after that. Could have one day where we're up in the 60s for highs, and then the following day we could end up seeing 30s, which is pretty nuts. So if you're across the Ohio Valley here, be ready for severe storms possibly on Thursday, and then make sure you're ready to bundle up on Friday. That's the deal we have there. We're going to be switching over to the dew points now. That being said, the main thing we're looking for is those 60-degree dew points. We got a pretty good idea of what the moisture flow is going to end up being. In fact, let me change this over to the wind barb so that way we get some good flow. Get a good idea of the surface flow, because that's going to be an important point in all of this. So I'm going to move this forward now. Okay, it's working. I was about to say, it was trying to freeze on me for a second. I'm like, come on, don't do that to me. And this is already by Tuesday. This is a day that we aren't really expecting severe weather. But we do see a moist sector that already is starting to pop up over Louisiana. And this actually ends up stretching back towards the west the early part of the day. And look at the dew points we end up getting. We're pushing towards 70 over towards Louisiana. Parts of Texas early in the day. And then the next part of this, we see them stretching it, these 60-degree plus dew points, stretching all the way into Arkansas. The entire state of Mississippi has dew points above 60 degrees by the time we get into the overnight hours. And then this moist sector really starts to come in across the early morning hours, which I find very concerning. It's going to be a very muggy morning across the southeast for the most part. So we'll have to keep an eye on the weather here. And the worst weather, I think, will be expected between 21Z and 00Z. So that's probably going to be between 3 to 7 p.m. across the southeast. And this weather will persist for a little bit, all the way up towards maybe Friday morning. But just as soon as that moist sector heads out, storm threat's over, we see those dew points drop, and we go from there. It's a pretty similar look on the GFS, but I think the dew points are actually a bit stronger with this one, unfortunately. I don't know which one to lean towards. I'm obviously going to root for the Euro, because as much as I like seeing storms, I don't want to see anyone get hurt. And like I said, it's a very similar look. Dew points are actually the same here. Yesterday I was seeing a little bit more deviance between the two models. The fact that they're agreeing is a little bit more reassuring, but also a little bit concerning, because the fact of the matter is both of them are showing a pretty similar look and a pretty gnarly look nonetheless. So we'll just have to see if this trends, and hopefully it does. Because I'm not liking, because I'll be going to be honest, I don't like what I'm seeing. I mean, I'm not one that'll tell you what you want to hear on this channel. I'm one that will tell you what you need to hear. And what's needed to be heard here is do not sleep on this system. This is not one to play with. So we're going to jump this all the way towards Tuesday night into Wednesday morning. Get a feel of things. That first system that becomes a trough, that first trough that ends up getting injected, looks like it becomes a pretty solid winter system across the northern plains, by the way. And I'll talk about that probably later tonight or early tomorrow morning, since things messed up with my video last night. I do have a schedule on how I do things. But that being said, we can see our next system come in. Cold air is already in place for that. So across the central and northern plains, there could be another snowstorm that comes in right behind this. There's a pretty impressive wintry setup. And, ooh, this is interesting. So last night, the Euro was kind of leaning more so towards discrete storms earlier in the day. Now we're seeing discrete storms getting into the twilight hours and into the overnight. So this is a little bit more alarming. This kind of has me leaning into more of an increased tornado threat here too. It's not going to show up on these soundings, but the hordeographs kind of tell me a lot there. And then in the overnight hours, this picks up in coverage. So we may even have to watch Missouri here, because this actually looks pretty intense. I'm going to go ahead and take a sounding of that. It's a little bit too cold. And it looks like there's a little bit of a cap going there. Thankfully. Because this is the first time I've seen that look. But as we head towards Thursday morning, we can see that line of semi-discrete cells developing. We see prefrontal cells developing ahead of that. And as a result, we could be seeing a large spanning severe weather event. We even see a few discrete cells across the Ohio Valley, which is pretty crazy. Do these end up having the vorticity they would need to end up producing all forms of severe weather? Hard to say. It's leaning more towards a cold core setup, if anything. But still, the potential is very much there. And of course, we'll be watching that snow band that tries to develop across Kansas, Nebraska, and heading through northeast, and then the northern plains, and then the Great Plains. Then eventually we'll watch that rain clear out on Friday. Pretty similar situation with the GFS. The GFS wasn't as well defined yesterday though either, so it's kind of hard to really pick up on things. We still see that look of a potential confluence band developing there, and this could lead to an early morning threat across the Ohio Valley, and then we'll watch these storms start to develop. We'll have to watch the prefrontal with this setup, but big squall line expected to develop Thursday night, and then by Friday, this weather is out of here. So it's going to be interesting to see how things play out with this one. Hopefully this is one where the outbreak isn't really bad, but if things continue to uptick, which I'm honestly kind of leaning more towards it doing so, I'm intending on live streaming this Thursday, especially if I end up being rained out at work. We'll have to see how that goes, but I may just still live stream it anyway. But that all depends on the timing of everything, whether I get to work and what time would I get off, if anything. But that being said, hope you guys found this video useful. You enjoyed it. If you did, you know what to do. Drop a like, share the video, of course. And if you haven't subscribed already, definitely do so. 80% of you are still not subscribed to my videos, but you guys are watching. Appreciate you guys doing that, but help the brother out. We're trying to get to 300 before March 6th. That's the 1 year anniversary of my first video, which is really, I would consider it to be the first year anniversary of the channel. But enough rambling. Appreciate you guys again. This has been Tyler Metalhead Weatherman. You guys take care, stay safe, and I will see you in the next one.